today to talk about a program that is very important to Newburgh and very important to cities and communities across the state. My office is funding land banks, and if you look at the buildings behind us, you'll get an idea of what we are facing across the state of New York. This section of Lander Street is one of the most distressed areas in the city of Newburgh. There are no shortage of abandoned buildings and distress blocks here. This city is still struggling to get past the foreclosure crisis that was so devastating to our communities and that led to an epidemic of vacant and abandoned properties that are a great hindrance to any plans for economic recovery. Since I've been the Attorney General of New York State, I've made it a top priority to go after the banks and others whose reckless misconduct brought about the crash of the housing market and the foreclosure crisis, and to get the money we get from those banks and others into the communities that have been hurt, to help the New York families that have been hurt, and to help communities like this that have been devastated by the foreclosure crisis. In Newburgh, we have an outstanding land bank. I'm proud to be your partner. And your local and state representatives have been a great team in making this land bank a success, and we look forward to greater success. For those of you who don't know, land banks are nonprofit organizations affiliated with local governments that acquire distressed or underutilized properties like 45 Lander Street behind us, and either rehabilitate them so they can be sold or for affordable housing, or rented out, or in some cases demolished so they can be the land can be put to other use by the community. Land banks are a proven way to deter crime and prevent crime that abandoned properties attract. They end the cycle of decay and declining property values. They relieve cities and towns from the burden of having to maintain abandoned properties, which in times when budgets are tight is a serious problem. And they ensure that properties get back on the tax rolls and help communities recover. When we first began our work after first pursuing the banks, when we first began our work of helping to ensure that the money went to where it was most needed, we started with help for individual families, but we immediately realized that if you live on a block with several abandoned properties, even if you kept your home, you are a victim of this crisis as well. Property values go down, crime goes up, and we're committed to working with folks like the great team you have in Newburgh to address that problem. The targeted approach that they are taking in Newburgh is a great example for land banks around the state and around the country. The buildings behind us are just a few of the single and multi-family homes on Lander Street that the Newburgh Community Land Bank is working to rehabilitate or restore. As just one measure of how effective the land bank has been, our office presented our first awards for funding for land banks across the state last year, and Newburgh's land bank received $2.5 million through a competitive bidding process, and they have leveraged these resources to raise over $5 million in additional support. That combined public and private financing is enabling the land bank to execute a full redevelopment plan here on Lander Street and create a livable, appealing neighborhood in the heart of the historic East End district. There's a huge return on investment for land banks like this that are effectively run and that leverage their resources, and you know how much that investment is needed. Newburgh was hit very hard by the collapse of the economy in 2008 and the foreclosure crisis. It has one of the highest rates of abandonment and delinquency in all of New York State. Pace University Law School did a study that found that Newburgh, a city of just 4 square miles, has over 600 vacant homes. The abandoned structures behind us and along this street are powerful examples of what the downward spiral of abandoned properties can mean. I am confident that with our partners here and the Newburgh Community Land Bank, we're going to reverse that downward spiral, and you're going to see a revival on Lander Street and a revival in the town of Newburgh, the city of Newburgh. The artist's renderings here show two things. The one on the far side are these buildings, and they are going to be redeveloped into workforce housing. They will create, I believe they're going to create something like 20 rental units here. And they're just part of the larger plan reflected in this diagram showing properties that have been taken over or will be taken over by the Community Land Bank. This is an opportunity to create single-family homes, apartments, opportunities for home ownership. Land banks are doing this all over the state, and the original law that created land banks did not provide any funding for land banks, just something occasionally program. My office proposed a bill in Albany to increase the number of land banks permitted from 10 to 20, and just 2 weeks ago that bill was signed into law, and I thank the Assemblyman for being one of the strong supporters of that legislation. But creating land banks doesn't do you any good unless there is funding. Our office has already awarded $13 million to land banks across the state, from Long Island to the Hudson Valley to Central and Western New York. That $13 million has started the ball rolling to put hundreds of abandoned and vacant properties back into good use. But the need is so significant that today we are announcing that my office is allocating another $20 million through a competitive request for application process, bringing our total to $33 million for land banks, empowering local communities and the activists and the advocates that work with them to bring about a real transformation in places like Newburgh. What you will see as this process continues are rehabilitated homes, a revival of the community, and assistance in economic recovery for years to come. We have set up a competitive RFP process. This second round of funding, the $20 million, will be given out through a process of applications that are due by October 19th. We are encouraging other jurisdictions that do not have land banks to set them up. We are hopeful that we will be recovering more funds to devote to this critically important purpose. But there is no land bank that we've seen the level of skillful collaboration and real creativity and aggressive action than we have in Newburgh. And with that, I'm very proud to introduce a great colleague in government, Mayor Judy Kennedy.
Attorney General here, Eric Schneiderman. We have talked a lot, and I so appreciate what you're doing for the city of Newburgh. It is a very important support that we need, and I so appreciate your support, Assemblyman Scartatos, and of course I work with Chief Vatter and with Madeline Fletcher. This day, and by the way, I also want to bring about the renaissance of the city of Newburgh. This city is destined to be the Queen City of the Hudson Valley again. It is by rights it should be that. And with the architecture here, with the support from the Attorney General's office, with the support from our Assemblyman, with the support from the government,